So without further ado, I'll hand the microphone over to Debi Lilly, and Debi's going to tell us about a perfect event.
I've got my Janet Jackson headset on. Hello? I need a, there.
I look so much happier in the summer.
Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about a perfect event or not. And I'll just share that I'm so uncomfortable talking to anyone, let alone a room full of beautiful people like you, about when things go horribly wrong at work. I am a person who's designing events. I've got some fun pictures for you that are beautiful and gorgeous and, inspirational. And yet here I am trying to pour out really painful, personal, raw stories about when horrible things have happened. But I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to take one for the team. So we do a lot of really gorgeous events. These are some that we've done for Miss Winfrey. And we are always creating everything perfectly, like, custom chair covers and custom tablecloths. And these are napkins that have been embroidered with Forrest Whitaker's initials. Lots of details, lots of things that could possibly go wrong. But it's our job to make sure that every single one of these 3D Oscar cakes that were made and packaged don't fall apart before guests take them at the end of the night. Or we just threw a Food Network event with all these fun friends here for 100 couples being married at once for the South Beach Wine and Food Festival. You can imagine how crazy that is. We were writing the ceremony for Guy to be the officiant, hundreds of people, all kinds of stress, all kinds of fun chefs. I think it was about 30 or 40 different chefs preparing all the food, beautiful flowers, but in the hot 100-degree Florida sun. All these kinds of things can go wrong. Drag queens flying in from Los Angeles, all sorts of things. So what can we do to always make sure that things go well? Well, you know that you can't plan for a crisis, but you can plan and be as prepped as you possibly can. It's my job to have detailed schedules and work plans and vendor checklists and confirmations, but you can't really plan for an emergency. When I was trying to think of what the biggest, craziest, worst case problem I ever had with an event was, I thought about one wedding with 400 or 500 people at the Drake, and as everyone was getting onto these VIP coach buses to move us from the Drake to the ceremony, the grandfather of the groom had a heart attack and died. So everyone is at the church, and this has happened. Horrible. How do you plan for what to do to figure out how to make that situation go in any kind of way up from that terrible down point? And the lesson here, lesson number one for crisis, is to really make sure that when something terrible happens, you can be flexible. So important. Also to practice empathy. It is so easy to not know what to do, but to be able to react and be very kind, to share your emotion, to really help comfort those around you, to show that you care. There's an X, I can't move from the X, is the big lesson when something like that happens. I also thought about a situation where we were throwing a 400-person black tie fundraiser. We had to raise something like $1 million that night for a big hospital. And guess what? The power went out. The ballroom was pitch black. Imagine we're here, right? All the power goes out. How are we going to have this casino night? How is the band and the dance floor going to be packed? Another really crazy crisis. So here, lesson number 2. Try and plan for emergency scenarios. Try and think about, if the worst happens, what can we do? So that you have a little bit of a plan B. Very important is to always keep smiling. You are the go-to. You are the leader when you're an event planner, and you are the one who is looked to for the next step. So that's another very important lesson when in crisis. Make sure to be smiling. Make sure that as the leader, you're really helping keep everybody together. And just in case that ever happens to you, there was a piano in the band. We got the piano going. We opened all the curtains. We got some natural light in, and we still had a lot of fun. Another crazy event is one that when we were throwing a big wedding at Holy Name, my bride came in, my bridal party came in, all of a sudden another bride and her bridal party come in. And her wedding planner came in, and apparently this was the niece of Mayor Daley. And I was the wedding planner for a groom who's in an industry that we joked all week long that if one thing went wrong, just one thing, I would be in the lake in cement shoes. So a whole nother wedding coming in, let alone the mayor's niece, was not going to go very well. So this was another crisis and a terrible situation. All our hundreds of guests started coming in, all their hundreds of guests started coming in. And what do you do in that situation? So my lesson number 3 is to think faster, and in my situation, run faster than your competition. I knew in this occasion where the office and the administration was, and I ran there as fast as I possibly could. And another great thing to communicate very quickly and to try and be the first voice that shares some sort of a situation so that you can stay neutral and explain what's happening. I explained to the church office what was going on, and it turned out that the mayor had a visiting priest, and so that priest hadn't properly booked with the church. So guess what? I didn't end up in cement shoes. We did have the wedding. Mayor Daley and his 500 guests had to wait outside on State Street for their wedding, but it really was to the benefit that you think quickly, that you move quickly, that you act quickly, and that in a crisis, when something goes wrong, you try and stay very neutral. I think that, however, the worst event situation is this one, and that is when we were throwing a huge, huge event for a company right here in Chicago, and there were hundreds of guests. Michael Jordan was coming, again, Mayor Daley was coming, Oprah Winfrey was coming, every celebrity you can think of was coming. And the company kept bouncing their checks to us. So this was a huge event. It was like $300,000. We were tenting Rush Street. We were tenting the city sidewalks around, all sorts of things, all sorts of costs, and the company was making it very clear that they would not be able to pay their bills. But they had every excuse. And the event is getting closer and closer, and as the event planner, what do? Do you cancel the event? And in this sort of a big glamorous crowd, look like I'm unprofessional or, look like I backed out of the event? It was a really horrible situation to be in, to not know how to get out of not looking like the one who screwed up the event, basically. So in this situation, I did end up having the event because they had so many ways they were going to pay me when it was over. I will say that it was never paid. So this great, big, huge international company, you're welcome to come see me when I'm not on the microphone and being filmed, and I'll happily share who it was, to warn you for your own business and purpose and personal things. We had to take them to court to try and get money and get paid and pay our vendors and all those kinds of things. And you won't believe this, after a very long, evil court battle, they decided to file for bankruptcy. So then you can't even get anything once you've won the court case. And the judge, right then in the courtroom, said, you're not going to see a dime. You need to just give this whole thing up. But you know what? I was at that party and it was great. Which is such a huge slap in the face and was like a kick to the gut and all of that. But again, in that terrible situation, when an event went really, really wrong, lesson number 4, really try and focus on what you're grateful for. I was very lucky because I was devastated. I'm a small business, and I now had to soak up someone else's $300,000 debt or beg my vendors to, forgive some of the costs. That's a terrible position to be in, especially when it's a huge corporation, the David and Goliath kind of thing. But I tried to be very grateful for being healthy and being happy and having a business and not being that kind of an ethical or unethical company, and having a great support team around me. Also, really know who you can lean on. When something terrible happens, who can you lean on? I have my go-tos. On a terrible day when the worst thing happens, I know the 3 or 4 people that I can call that literally will make me feel better when I get off the phone. I also know, conversely, who I will not call, like my mother, who will not give me the support and the empathy that I'm looking for. Also, always in these worst of times, worst of situations, try and find inspiration. You know, in this situation, when I was stuck with a huge debt and as a small business really thought I would have to go bankrupt, I tried to figure out, like, what's the beauty here? What do I need to do to feel better? And it was, you know, kind of pulling away for a couple of weeks, spending some time with my family, going somewhere, whatever's your inspiration. Know that if you seek that in times when you're really stressed, when it's really difficult, it can help lift you back up. And then last, really learning a lesson when you're in these terrible situations about how to not let it happen again. I honestly got into this exact same kind of a situation again just recently, where a groom was bouncing all kinds of checks for a big wedding, and we actually backed out and walked away. And we didn't only just back out and walk away, sadly it was a few days before the wedding, but I shared with the vendors that this groom was bouncing international checks, like a very sophisticated system he had going, and he was in commercial real estate, and there was just something very strange happening. So I didn't only want to protect myself, but I wanted to help share with friends and vendors and pay it forward the terrible situation that I'd been in, to try and help someone else and not let them get into that same sort of sticky situation. So above all, I love this quote, this saying: don't get mad, don't get even, do better, rise above, become so engulfed in your own success that you forget whatever happened. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. It can become so easy when you're in a terrible, frustrating, difficult situation to let it get you down and to get bogged down, but we've got to pick ourselves back up, learn from it, look at it, and then keep moving forward and really focusing on the good work and the great work that you guys are doing, that we're all doing. Thank you. Was that 10 minutes?
Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. So one of the things that you mentioned was all the different things in the beginning of your presentation about the different concepts that you do and the fitted seat backs and so on. When you're in the process of concepting some of these things, how do you keep that process fresh? And does it always come from you? And if not, how do you find people to join your team that have that talent? How do you evaluate that talent?
Let's see, where should I start? So finding inspiration, I talked about that in the negative and how finding inspiration can really help lift you back up. But in the creative side, I think it's very much about keeping inspired and knowing what inspires you. For me, I love travel. I find travel incredibly inspirational. And I get so many new ideas, fresh ideas, interesting ideas outside and away from Chicago, which I think is really nice because it keeps your look and ideas a little different, maybe than your competition's. New hires, I think, was another question. I love anyone who has a ton of spunk and a ton of fire and great follow through and very wonderful communication. I cannot even tell you how many emails I get a week with typos and my name spelled wrong, which it is a funny spelling, so I understand. But you know, really being someone who shows a spark and shows passion. I'm very passionate about what I do, which is why it was very difficult to stand up here and talk about the worst days I've ever had. But seeing that in someone, you can see it immediately. And you can tell if the person's a good fit immediately, in my opinion, when they really do have that je ne sais quoi, that something special that shows they love what they do and what they're going to do.
So second question, so you've got a great resume now, and basically people are coming to you and asking you to do work for them. If you were to talk to somebody like somebody in the crowd here about how do I get into this, right? You're operating at a very high level. How does somebody that has that inspiration and desire, how would you recommend they go about the process of engaging the startup of their career in this?
Well, everyone thinks events are really fun, and they are, but they're also a ton of work. So what you could easily do, knowing how much work they are and how much help people who throw them need, is to get your foot in the door working part-time. We hire tons of people part-time, and they work with us whenever we have events. It might be once a week, it might be twice a week. For your own schedule, it might be once a month. But I think that's such a great way, whether it's with myself or with any event company that you know of here in the city. We're so lucky, we have so many. Get your resume to them, let them know that you'd want to start working part-time and get your foot in the door. Every single person that's full-time on our team started with us part-time and might have only started, on events, and I've hired people off Craigslist that have become great part-time employees that have then become full-time employees. We only hire full-time employees from within, and you've got to get your foot in the door and get to know the company and have them get to know you to have a good start.
That's great. Thank you so much, and thank you for helping to make this a perfect event.